Welcome to Smart Talk with Trey Graham, a program dedicated to helping you understand local, national, international news and politics, and their importance to you as a believer. Trey is an author, speaker, radio host, and senior pastor of First Melissa. Your comments and questions are always encouraged at treygraham.com. And now, here's your host, Trey Graham.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Smart Talk. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to continue our conversations about what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in the Holy Land, and about the first few weeks of the Donald Trump administration here, his second term in the White House. My guest right now today by telephone is Mudar Zahran. He's been a guest with us before. He is the leader of the Jordanian opposition movement. He is from the Kingdom of Jordan, and he is joining us from England right now. Mr. Zahran, great to talk to you. Welcome back to the program.
Pleasure being with you and your audience, sir, in the great state of Texas.
Good to visit with you. Let's first of all ask you some background questions. We've had many interviews here with many guests from Israel about the horrific attacks that occurred on October the 7th when Hamas attacked Israel. So take us back, please, and tell us about the response from your community, the moderate Muslim community, especially the Jordanians. What was your community's response when you heard about this horrific attack?
Okay, we need to be clear about things. As a proud Muslim myself, as someone who's very proud to have grown up in the United States, particularly the state of New Hampshire, it gave me the potential to see both ends of the argument and to be more sensible about things. So what you listeners is going to hear is the truth rather than the rhetoric you see in television and mainstream media. First of all, and a very quick background, I would like your listeners to know that I have the credentials to claim authority about what I'm going to say. I've served for the U.S. government, served for the U.S. Department of State in both Jordan and Iraq during very difficult times. I'm still working closely with several, let's say, governments and, agencies in those governments in multiple places. And I'm a frequent visitor to Israel. I have many friends in the Israeli government. This is quickly what happened. What happened on the 7th of October was, I'm not sure if that's the right word, biblically evil. It's like in a biblical scale, the evil that was exerted by Hamas is unspeakable, and people try to downplay it. This is very sad and very disappointing. I can authoritatively confirm things I have seen personally in the aftermath of entire homes of families locked inside who refused to come out, and Hamas burnt up the entire homes with the families inside, including children. That said, the response by the Muslim majority was rather disappointing in the sense that the majority of Muslims, my people, rejoiced over the massacre because it shows them that the Jewish enemy is getting killed and they get in the quote unquote tasting their own medicine. So there was a public response of joy. What does this mean for you and for the average person in Texas? It means that, to be honest, the Muslim community, Islam in general, which has been a big question for Americans since 9/11, they want to know if there are good Muslims, if all Muslims are evil. What's this story about Islam? I'll make it very simple for you, and you can connect it to the horrifying massacre on the 7th of October. The majority, the average Muslim, is no different than your neighbor in Texas. This is the world. Most people are average. They just normal, average Joes. They want to survive, have a good family. Now, when you dig into the ideology of Islam, you'll find two different ideologies. One in the Quran. The Quran is, whether you believe in Muhammad or not, I, for example, believe he's a prophet. The Quran is a copy of the Torah, the Old Testament. Very similar, and it has some certain views that were a little bit progressive for its time, 1400 years ago. Now we have another chapter. The Quran is barely 500 pages. It's got issues like slavery is allowed in the Quran, stuff that you would not approve of today, but it's not that evil of a book. It's not actually evil. It's just another religious book. The problem is with a book called the Hadith. The Hadith and Sunnah, the so-called Gospel of Muhammad, was written 250 years after Muhammad's death. If you dig into that book, it's 500,000 pages. It's got all kind of bizarre ideas, including conquest, world domination, and in more ways than other, identical Nazi ideology, the superiority of a certain religion, which is very similar to Nazi superiority of a certain race, and even the concept of dhimmi, you like allowing non-Muslims to live in the Muslim empire as second-class citizens who pay a certain tribute. This is exactly very similar to Hitler's ideology. So what does that translate to you? And I'm sorry, I'm going to run now because I need to say this. And the average Muslim you deal with, if he sticks to the Quran, is no different than necessarily the average Jew or Christian. Now, the Muslim who sinks into reading, sinks his teeth into biting this hadith book, the 500,000 pages, would automatically become ISIS. The book of hadith, they speak about enslavement, women rape, massacres, killing children, and so forth. That's a very evil book. That's a book that was written after the Prophet was dead, 250 years. And that book translates into the terror attack and the massacres by which Hamas murdered the Jews, and including even some Muslims and Arabs on the 7th of October.
We're visiting with Mudar Zahran, a Muslim leader, a Jordanian leader, and he's joining us on the telephone, and we're asking him about the response to October 7th before we get to the more present-day affairs. So my last question on this topic, sir, why did we not see the condemnation of the evil that you're describing from major Muslim leaders in America and in the rest of the world?
Well, when it comes to major Muslim leaders in America, we have a problem. First of all, there are some very decent Muslim leaders I've met in America and prayed at mosques. One occasion, one in Ohio and the other in Michigan. I've met some good Muslim imams in America, but we have to be clear. The Muslim establishment in America was dominated and hijacked by CAIR. CAIR is the Islamic Non-Discrimination Committee, which I think is based in Washington, D.C. CAIR is very closely associated with the Muslim Brotherhood. The folks in Texas may not exactly have heard of the Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood is a religious Islamic society established 8 decades ago, which seeks world domination. They are incredibly organized, very well financed, and very tolerated by globalist Western leadership. I mean, some people, I might offend some people, but I have to say it as it is. When George Bush, in the aftermath of 9/11, George Bush Jr. was, led the Department of Homeland Security take a very tough stance on Muslim immigrants. Hundreds of thousands were deported. Some of them didn't even pray or didn't even care about Islam just because they're Muslims. At the same time, Bush was welcoming Muslim Brotherhood leadership inside the White House. So there is this very nasty, unholy marriage between the globalist forces in the West who that's my opinion, and I'm free to have one, want to compromise what the West stands for and what particularly Americans stand for. And I know we have a short time, but you need, sir, to read what Americans stand for. The average American, especially in blessed states like Texas, they stand for faith. They have a strong faith system, family values, and they want men, to be tough. So I hate to say this, my religion has been avidly and relentlessly used by evil forces in the West to weaken the West and compromise the Western society, creating a menace for both Muslims and non-Muslims.
So when the aftermath of October 7th and the response by Israel after they were attacked and the bombings and the attacks in Gaza has left the Gaza Strip, as some say, unlivable. And again, this is a defensive measure, a responsive measure by the Israelis. But now the question is what to do with Gaza today. Why have the other Arab nations, Muslim nations, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, etc., why have they not come to the aid of the Gazans in the Gaza Strip?
Well, that's a very good question. I'm going to start with it. Except for Saudi Arabia, and I'm being honest about this, except for Saudis, The Arab countries have done, the Arab regimes have done very well with the Arab-Israeli conflict. They got away with stealing U.S. foreign aid. They got away with, blackmailing the world and the Western world in the name of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. They got away with oppressing the wrong people and telling them, no, we need to liberate Palestine. So in Jordan, for example, anytime the Palestinian majority, 95 to 97% of the population who lived like the segregation days some 65 years ago in the United States, seriously, there is real segregation in Jordan against the Palestinian majority. Those people, whenever they demand their rights, the king would just go on TV and start talking about liberating Palestine and retrieving, getting Jerusalem back from the Jews. He says that openly in television. So that's why they want this conflict to continue. That's why they're not even interested in solving the conflict. Let me be very clear to the average American who does not necessarily look very closely at the Middle East, but you need to know there was a country called Palestine under the occupation, the British mandate for Palestine under the British. And it has both Jews and Arabs in it, and they were both called Palestinians. After the British left in 1948, there was a separation and a war that resulted in the status quo. But there's something most people don't realize. There was never a country called Jordan. Jordan is 78% of the British mandate for Palestine. Jordan is a majority, more than 95%. This is proven with the documents, are Palestinians. Jordan, the only thing that's not Jordanian, the Palestinian Jordan, is the king himself. And that's a very small family who's been playing, both ends against the middle, the Israelis against the Palestinians. The problem with the Palestinian, it doesn't make sense for people to be homeless and stateless for 8 decades. You wouldn't agree, for example, someone from Texas or Mexico or Canada to suddenly not have a home for 8 decades. They have a home. That home is called Jordan. And when President Trump calls for rehousing or resettling the Palestinians in Gaza into Jordan in particular, that's a very valid point for the following reasons. And you need to look it up, and you can look me on Twitter and see the details. The Jordanian law, Jordanian citizenship law, dictates that every Palestinian, unless they're Jewish, unless they're Palestinian Jews, and it shows that there has been Palestinian Jews, every Palestinian is a natural born Jordanian. So it's the right by birth, the right of citizenship by being born. So the Gazans are Jordanian citizens, and they're being denied the right of return into their country. I need to put 2 things on record. One, about the Israelis and how they acted in Gaza and the aftermath of it, and where the Gazans want to be. I can authoritatively confirm to you, no Gazans want to be in Gaza at the moment. Nobody, let alone the rhetoric, the nonsense you see in television, except for Hamas clowns, because they own Gaza and they make a lot of money controlling the food items and the supply of goods. Gazans want to leave at any cost, and they would happily leave to Jordan. Gaza now requires up to 15 years just to rebuild the infrastructure. Where are people going to go? 72% of Gazans don't have a home at the moment. Who's going to build them homes? They want to move somewhere else. This situation is not sustainable. The president was very logical. The president was very honest, and he's got the intel. He's got the information that the majority of Palestinians would love to settle in Jordan, according to a U.S. Embassy Amman Jordan cable that was leaked into the media a few years ago. The majority of Palestinians do not care for returning to their homes from 8 decades ago in Israel. They want to settle in Jordan, believe it or not. These are the cables. One more thing that I want to put in the record about the Israelis, and they are my friends, my brothers and sisters. I care for them as much as I care for my people, and I have to put this on record. The Israelis in Gaza were fighting Hamas with the civilians in the middle, because Hamas deliberately, with all videos and documents to prove it, did hide behind civilians. There's no question about that. In addition, I, as an ex-serviceman myself, I can assure you, it's very sad, but this is the situation. When in doubt at war zones, and a lot of your listeners have served and they know exactly what I'm talking about, when in doubt, pull the trigger. There was a problem that you're dealing in a very small area And that small area is at least 40,000 hostile elements who are shooting at you, blowing themselves up. So the Israelis had no chance. And I can authoritatively confirm, and to be honest, fair, and square, they've done their best to avoid civilian casualties. Nonetheless, it is what it is. It's nasty over there. Dogs are eating bodies off the streets. Gazans don't have running water. They don't have electricity, and they don't have health care. They need to leave as soon as possible before more children die.
I'm visiting with Mudar Zahran today on Smart Talk, a Muslim leader, a Jordanian leader. He's giving us some very important information today about what's happening in Gaza and the aftermath of October 7th. And, sir, you said most Gazans want to move to Jordan, and you said Jordanian law requires them to be accepted. And if those two things are true, why has it not already happened?
Because we have a dictator king. His name is Abdullah, who is openly, not even covertly, not even secretly. He's openly connected to Iran. He's a frequent visitor of the Ayatollah. He's in bed with the evil axis, which is Iran, China. I hate to say this. China is very involved. Very few Americans realize how dangerous China really is at the moment. And he is with that axis, and he's not pro-American. He's enjoying American taxpayers' money, though. He wants, in his book, if he opens the door for Palestinians, he will help end the Arab-Israeli conflict, and that's not what he wants. Let me be clear. Some people would like to dictate to you that Palestinians are crazy. I need to be clear because, again, we have short time, and I try to be of use to your listeners as much as I can. This is where the Palestinians stand on what happened on the 7th of October and on jihad in general. The Palestinians in Gaza, 2.1, 2.2 million, they don't care for Hamas. They don't care for jihad. They elected Hamas 20-something years ago, and they tasted firsthand how to be ruled by an Islamic radical group. Hamas has assaulted the women regularly, raped young women, Palestinian women, often killed Palestinian men just because they criticize Hamas. They have the signature murder, which is they would point the machine gun right at someone's knees, shoot, and then leave them bleeding until death, make an example out of them. The Gazans hate Hamas. On the other hand, Palestinian inside Israel, inside the West Bank or Judea and Samaria, which is one of the holiest places ever in the Holy Land, the Palestinians in those areas, they would worship Hamas. If Hamas tells them to jump, they would ask how high. Those people are totally brainwashed in Judea and Samaria and the West Bank. They are my people. I have relatives, direct, close relatives living there, but I can assure you those people have been brainwashed, and because they have not been under Hamas rule, they think the grass is green at the other fence, and they think all we need is an Islamic rule and everything's going to go perfect. Those people can be very dangerous if given the chance, and they would do the 7th of October massacre 10 times fold. Now, the majority of Palestinians live in Jordan, where up to 11 million Palestinians live, up to 95% plus of the population. The Jordanian government under the King of Jordan keeps staging protests against Israel. This is what you need to see to understand that in most Arab countries, when you see an anti-American protest or demonstrations, it's usually done by the government itself. Same goes for Israel, anti-Israeli demonstrations. 11 million Palestinians, and the King of Jordan, Abdullah, his media, and his wife is Palestinian. She's always on U.S. national television, demonizing Jews, demonizing Israel, accusing Israel of genocide, and so forth. You can look her up on YouTube. She's been on CNN and elsewhere. Very, very anti-Semitic woman. So they both incite openly on the media for protests in Jordan. The outcome, 11 million Palestinians, only barely 1,000 show up. It tells you the Palestinians in Jordan do not want jihad. They're not interested. They are not a threat. The bottom line is, if America is paying a lot of your tax money to sustain the Arab-Israeli conflict, this is going to stop under President Trump. And eventually the world will get to call Jordan for what it really is, the Palestinian state. We always have had a state That state is Jordan. That would ignite the process for peace, true peace in the Middle East, where the Palestinians would get their own home in Jordan and the Israelis would get their own home in Israel with the River Jordan in between. Sir, I kid you not, I came back from Israel, returned just a month ago, a little over a month ago. That land is the land of milk and honey. That land is blessed like no other. That's God's country. Basically, Jordan, Israel, Palestine, even Lebanon and Syria, and I went even inside Syria with the Israelis. I can assure you that land, if given the chance, will be one of the best places ever to live. And that, I believe, from my sources, that's President Trump's plan for the region.
Okay, sir, we have a short time left. I do need to ask you this question. You say most of the people in Gaza want to be free. Most of them want to just live their life. You say most of them hate Hamas. Then why do we see the riots and the heckling and the poor treatment of the Israeli hostages by the crowds in Gaza?
You are a smart man, and your listeners are pretty much smart. The folks in Texas are known for being kind, nice, but very smart at the same time. That's it. You are smart enough, all of you, to realize that the hostages are very precious commodity for Hamas. So a hostage is a very precious piece of cargo for them. This is how they look at him. They would not allow anyone near them who is not a Hamas. The protests were staged. And I have a photo, an aerial photo of one of those hostage delivery protests where the Hamas members and Hamas so-called, audience are there. It's less than 1,000 people. Gaza has 2.2 billion in them. At the same time, people who attacked on the 7th of October, they attacked. Hamas would not allow the average Gazan to join the attack for pure military reasons. They can't trust someone else. They know the Gazans hate them. So people who went, stole homes, even in civilian clothes, robbed homes, killed, stole even dogs. Some of them stole even dogs and cattle. They were all Hamas. I'm telling you, it's not dandy sweet. I'm telling you, the Palestinians in the West Bank would put Hamas to shame if given the chance. Palestinians in the West Bank, almost 3 million people, on average, the average person there, if given the chance, they are so brainwashed, they would make the 7th of October look like child's play. So you need to know who you're dealing with. The average Palestinian in the West Bank is, in fact, very dangerous when it comes to dealing with Israel. The average Palestinian in Gaza, they've learned their lesson the very, very, very hard way. You need to know thy enemy. Know thy enemy. You cannot anyone making proper assessment of the situation without knowing exactly the nature of the other side. And I hate to say this, sir, a lot of so-called experts, which are in American television and mainstream media, they come with nonsense like, oh, all Muslims are evil. All Palestinians are crazy. That doesn't help because that's not the case. I say it as it is, and the truth shall set us all free.
My guest today for a very interesting interview has been Mudar Zahran, the leader of the Jordanian opposition movement, a Muslim man, a writer, a teacher, a thinker. He's joining us on the phone from England. Sir, thank you. I look forward to our next conversation.
God bless you, sir, and bless America.
That's going to do it for today's program. I do thank Mudar Zahran for being my guest. You got some very interesting insights and different perspectives from a Muslim leader, a Jordanian, as we look at the horrific attacks of October the 7th and the response by Muslims around the world. We will continue to bring you smart people here on Smart Talk, so make sure you join us every week. Join us Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. here on The Word for Faith Walk, our daily Bible teaching program. Join us Sunday mornings in our church home at First Melissa. Worship services on Sundays, 9 a.m. or 10:15 a.m. Go to firstmelissa.com to find out about our church home. Go to treygraham.com to learn about our radio ministries. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. We will see you next Sunday at 4 p.m. right here for more Smart Talk.
You've been listening to Smart Talk with Trey Graham, a program dedicated to helping you understand local, national, international news and politics. Trey is an author, speaker, radio host, and senior pastor of First Melissa. Your comments and questions are always encouraged at treygraham.com. As a listener-supported radio ministry, we'd appreciate your generous financial gift. Again, the website is treygraham.com. Thank you for being with us, and join us next time for Smart Talk with Trey Graham. Talk with Trey Graham. Talk with Trey Graham. Talk with